Welcome to another episode of Home Sweet Home. My name is Rod McCall.
And I'm Scott Nichols. Where are we at today? What's going on?
Well, it took a little bit of promise on my part that you would pay for some, dinners out, but I talked to your wife and she said she'd come back.
Right.
So we have Eileen back. Hi, Eileen.
Hi.
Glad you were persuaded, and don't hold, Scott to all the promises I said he would do, but we're glad you're back. So thanks for coming. Now, what I thought we would do, and last time, we've been hitting some pretty heavy topics with, divorce and alienation. And so I thought, and I ran across this blog, because, I read all kinds of things. And so I ran across this blog that was talking about maybe we should forgive mom and dad.
Really?
Yeah. And I got thinking, mom and dad do the best they can with because frankly, kids do not come. I think you guys as parents, me as a parent, can agree. And I remember my mom and dad saying this, kids do not come with an owner's manual.
No, they don't.
So you kind of fly by the seat of your pants on what to do, doing basically, either 100%. I think most people have a default setting that they revert to things or words that their parents did.
Sure.
No matter how much you swear, you are not going to say specific words like clean your room or don't you sass back at me. You roll those eyes, I will smack you into next week. Or whatever phrase, your parents may have said. You swear you weren't going to do it. And then lo and behold, you say it and do it.
Of course.
And then we become our parents. It's like, son of a gun. So anyway, I ran across this blog, and the guy's name is Barton Goldsmith, Dr. Barton Goldsmith. And I mean, this guy's an expert. For over 40 years, he's been a leading expert on relationships, on communication, personal growth. I mean, the guy wrote 8 books. All right, 8 books dealing with personal growth and relationship and advice. So I thought, well, okay, this guy might actually know something. And so the idea was forgiving mom and dad, taking a look at, because, maybe you weren't the easiest child to raise. I mean, I was. I mean, I can just say, I'm sure my sisters would totally agree that, I was an easygoing child, mild, mellow, followed the rules, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. On the surface, that's what I did, too. There was no smoking or, any of the bad things taking place,
Oh, yeah. No sneaking out.
Definitely not in the house, anyway.
Oh, yeah.
But when I left at 7 a.m. and came back at 7 p.m., that was 12 hours in between.
Don't ask, don't tell.
That's right. You know it, baby.
So anyway, I thought, so as I explored this, some of the things with history, with age, okay, back that up. With age comes experience. With age and experience combined, you get the benefit of retrospection. And I think that's kind of, as I read through his blog, that's kind of how I understood it. My dad recently passed away. Well, it's been a little over a year ago already, but with his passing, my mom getting up there in age, me way, way, way behind them, but being a little bit older, you laugh it up there, furball.
That's right.
I mean, yeah, I
both y'all are ahead of me, so.
But the idea of being able to look and better understanding. I think I understand my mom and dad better today than I did when I was 16 years old. Because I swore up and down, my mom and dad, I don't know about y'all, But I swore my mom and dad were some of the dumbest people on God's green earth, and I wondered how the Sam Hill did you make it to your stage in life being as dumb and out of touch with reality as you are.
Well, sure. I mean, everybody does that, right? Until you turn 25, and then you start realizing a couple of things that maybe they were right about. And then you get 30, and you're like, oh, there's some more. And then you get 40, and there's a whole lot more. By the time you're 50, boy, they were right on most of what they did, right, or what they said, at least. Maybe not their actions, but their some of their wisdom that they had. So, yeah, I mean, we all think we're the smartest when we're in our teens.
Oh, yeah. I tell my students all the time when they get a little cocky and arrogant and all that, I tell them, I wish I was half as smart as I thought I was when I was your age today.
That's right. Like a sophomore, right? A wise fool.
Right? Yeah, that's true. Oh, no. So I thought maybe we could, like I said, I wanted to dive into this blog of his, and he starts with talking about our early days as a kid. And early on, our relationship with mom and dad is a key component to this thing they called attachment. And the healthier our attachment is to mom and dad, the healthier we are as adults and our success as adults at all stages in life, from early adulthood to middle age to old age, which I'm a long way from. But when we have an unhealthy attachment, then that can create a lot of problems, a lot of trauma. It can create a lot of emotional disturbances in our growth. It impacts our relationships, our ability to have jobs. All these kinds of things can be directly attached to how we bond with our parents.
Okay.
And so, but that's on mom and dad. Mm-hmm. Mom and dad set that stage, how loving they are, how much they look at you and they say, I love you.
Okay.
How much they hug you, how much they say, I am proud of you, appreciate you, or just the opposite, how much they ignore you, how much they go, whatever.
So if my parents were the loving parents that said, I love you and did all this stuff, right, then I don't really have anything to forgive them for. But if they were the opposite of that, why the heck are you telling me I should forgive them?
Well, because that's just the early part.
Okay.
That's the early stage. Because what did mom and dad do for you? What kind of boundaries did they set? I was reading an article today by this lady from Australia, and she says, moms and dads today are raising a bunch of namby-pambies.
Yeah. Doesn't every generation say that?
Well, that's true, but they were pointing to the use of technology, that they're not teaching children to be resilient. They're not teaching children by saying, no, you really can't do that.
Yeah, no is a problem, right? Like it's not something that we really talk about anymore. Everything's a possibility.
Well, I mean, my mom and dad were kind, generous, loving people, but they also set boundaries, and those boundaries were frustrating sometimes. And I know my older sisters really rebelled against that. I know my little sister rebelled. And what he's saying is that, look, you know what? No matter how much mom and dad shared their love with you, a lot, a little, or somewhere in between, if you were a screwball, then take ownership. Because, you also have free will. And what kind of kid were you growing up? Well, how much of a rule follower? I mean, Eileen, you said before when you were here with us that, you were a good kid. You did well in school. You were a rule follower. Wow. That was not me. I mean,
that wasn't me either.
And so my mom and dad would put in rules and boundaries and consequences when I would break them. And I would get pissed. But yet at the same time, whose fault was it for breaking it? Was it their fault? And that's kind of what he's saying here. Take ownership. Take ownership of what you did. I mean, what did you do for college? Did you go to college? What are you doing for a career? I mean, are you one of those that jump jobs all the time? Are you having a hard time having a job? Are you addicted to drugs or alcohol and that's having a huge negative impact on your ability to hold down a job, financial security, relationships? I mean, did mom and dad make that happen or did you make that happen?
But does that discount the overall experience? And for Eileen's story, she told us she kind of dived into education. She dived into her high school, her grades. She did all the things that we would hope students would do in any normal situation, even,
Sure.
right? And she was in a very abnormal situation, or maybe it's more normal than it should be. But she did those things, and what if her parental situation had been different? Would she have done those things? I mean, maybe not, right?
Okay,
So
good point.
to some extent, right, the situation that's happening in the household between the parents can affect that either positively or negatively.
Fair enough. Absolutely.
I mean, is that?
Well,
what do you think?
Yeah, I think that because overall, my mom growing up was, even though that came up during the divorce, but she was like that. That was just who she was. You fell out of her graces very easily. And so I learned by watching my older siblings, and I learned not to do what they did. And so, but because of that, I was successful in school. I excelled. I'm a teacher now. So in some ways, when we talk about forgiveness, I think about how, well, maybe I wouldn't be where I was if my mom hadn't acted that way. And so should I not forgive her? Because I'm a direct result of some negative things that happened in my life, but they turned out to be positive. So I can see where forgiveness can be something that you can extend.
And that's, I think, what he's talking about here. And sometimes the trauma that we go through, we may not realize. I never really understood why I hated dogs. Now, I don't hate dogs anymore, but when I was 5 years old, the neighbor's German Shepherd broke out of the backyard and jumped on me. And I don't know that they mauled me. Heck, the dog may have been licking my face. But I remember this big, scary German Shepherd jumping on me, knocking me to the ground, and I was terrified. But it took me a long time to realize why I wasn't a big dog fan. I mean, like I say, I am now. We have a little Wiener Schnitzel dog, cute as a button. But it took me a long time. And one of the things they're saying is that sometimes it requires a little bit of therapy. And he was saying, don't be afraid of therapy. And I think that the idea of the old Cary Grant, strong, silent type, hide your emotions thing, that may have been effective at one point in time. But I don't know that concept works as well today. Maybe I'm biased because I'm becoming a therapist. But I know that being able to talk about things might help you recognize why you think or feel a certain way.
I think that humans are inherently relational, right?
So, yeah, absolutely.
Whether you're seeking professional counseling or psychology or any of that stuff is kind of irrelevant in a way, and stay with me here, because I'm not suggesting we don't do that, right? In fact, I'm suggesting we do. But I'm just saying that regardless of whether you're seeking it professionally, you are seeking counseling because you're doing that thing where you're saying, I just want to vent. Just let me vent, right? Just let me vent to you, or I just need to get this out. So you're seeking counseling from people who aren't really very well equipped to help you.
Well, maybe that's why people would go to the bar and talk to the bartender.
Sure.
They would self-medicate with the alcohol and then vent to the bartender.
Right. So everybody, I mean, there's there in the past, there's been a stigma. Of course, it's gotten a lot better, but there's been a stigma in the past on these kinds of things. But everybody's doing it. Everybody's been doing it forever.
Sure.
And it's just all you're doing is going to somebody who can actually help you
Yes.
and venting with them.
Yes.
Right.
And
I'd rather come and yell at you than yell at my wife.
By all means, come and vent.
I mean, I do that anyway, but.
Well, I know. And before.
No, I mean, because I'm yelling at Rod.
Hey, not a problem. And, it won't be long, and I can actually get out the couch and charge you a small fee.
I know we'll go back to our morning meetings at some point.
But to your point, that's therapy.
Right.
And I think that by having those kinds of conversations, things that maybe we repressed when we were younger can come out. And you can explore and you can talk. And by verbalizing some of these things, you may realize or consider a different perspective. Well, maybe mom and dad weren't the negative. Or maybe they were trying to keep you on the straight and narrow so you didn't go do stupid stuff that would have a long-term negative consequence or could potentially, cause you to have physical harm to yourself, like losing a body part, or go out, drive drunk and kill somebody. I mean, their goal was you may have pushed at the time, but maybe it was better. Maybe they understood.
Sure.
Because like I said before, I really better understand my mom and dad today and what they tried to teach. And for the most part, I can say they were mostly successful. But I didn't really appreciate it until much, much later. And I'll show you how much of a slow learner I'm at. I was way past 25 when I began to appreciate and understand a lot. In fact, I don't think it really began until I became a dad, until Eric was born. That was in 2003. So I then began to understand and appreciate, because I honestly, I hated my dad for working all the time. My dad worked 40 hours a week plus every Saturday and sometimes on Sunday. And he wouldn't work just, 8 to 5. He'd sometimes work from 7 to 7.
Those dang bills making us work all the time.
And, but I didn't.
But you wouldn't know that because I'm kid, going, right?
I don't have anybody to play catch with. And I would have to play catch with mom. Well, mom's not playing catch like dad. I didn't get into Cub Scouts because, my dad wasn't available to, we didn't have a den parent to volunteer. Well, dad couldn't because couldn't do that. I going fishing, going hunting, stuff like that. That was, I never went hunting, never learned how to hunt. Kind of learned how to fish, but not really because, again, dad was working all the time. And I got so frustrated. And as I got older, I'm going, why can't you be a normal dad like these guys is, like my friend's dad, and take me to do these things? And but I also, when I became a dad, I understood family first. And you've got to sacrifice what you want to do. I think my dad wanted to take me hunting. He learned how to hunt from his dad when he was a kid. I think he wanted to teach me how to play baseball. I think he wanted to do all the things that I wanted him to do, but he had to work.
Right.
And I mean, my mom, like you were saying, like your mom was a stay-at-home mom. And she worked. Oh, Lord, did she work. But I did not appreciate the sacrifices that they made.
Yeah. Well, like you said at the beginning, right? Like there's no manual for this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even as far as marriage and relationship between, like, there's no real manual for that. There's lots of good ideas. There's lots of great books. There's lots of good things you can do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's lots of. I mean, if there was a manual on it, everybody, all the counselors would be out of business. We wouldn't have this podcast. We wouldn't need it.
Yeah.
Right, because it would be it would be obvious what everybody needed to do. But this whole situation of parents and kid and man, I mean, I have a picture in my mind, and I've got weird pictures sometimes, right? So I get this picture in my mind of like a pickup truck that's normally has a gas engine, but has been married up to a diesel engine, but you have a Corvette manual, right? Like, how do you do that, right? Like, so you might go buy a book, from some child expert, but you don't really know if that's going to work, because what that book is telling you to do is just the opposite of what the next book is telling you to do, and your kid seems to be doing something completely different, and who the heck knows what's going on, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't really know how to handle it as a parent, and from a kid's perspective, it's just, the kid's just thinking, leave me alone, let me do my thing, right? Or come with me to Cub Scouts, or do whatever that I want to do, right? Because this is my world. This is about me, not about you. And so it's complex in that way. But from as you get to being an adult, like you were saying, I mean, looking back, I mean, did my parents screw up? Did Eileen's parents screw up? Did your parents screw up? Sure. Everybody screws up to some level, right? I mean, we tell our kids sometimes, they'll tell us something that really bugs them, like the dishwasher incident or something that I always bring up. And it's like, well, if that's the worst thing you've got to complain about me for, then I guess that's so bad, right? Uh-huh. I expected worse. And there's probably worse things that maybe will come up later in life, but we're all going to screw up. And so, your parents screwed up. If you're a parent, you're screwing up. And for no other reason, that's a good reason to forgive.
Well, and if you're a child and you're mad at your parents for something that they did, okay, fair enough. But should you hold on to that?
Yeah. Now, I do think that Eileen's situation here, and I know she's been sitting over there,
like a bobblehead,
staring at us, like But anyway, her situation, whereas her mom passed away 19 years ago, and her dad passed away only this year. That's she's had a different story and a different and it's harder maybe to forgive once they're gone. I don't know.
Well, it's funny because I actually, after my father died, I actually went into counseling, and I see a therapist, and because it just got too big, all the feelings, all the hurts, just got too big for me. But there's a couple of things that have helped me through it, and some of it's my faith. My faith has been a huge part of it. Going to counseling has been a huge part of it. But so to look at the relationship with my dad, when we went to my dad's house in the last few days of his life, as he was dying, and we were sitting there, and I watched him interact with his wife's children and their grandchildren, and it was really, really hard. There was one incident where one of the grandsons came in, and they had a relationship where my dad would always give him M&Ms. Now, this guy was a grown man, right? Mm-hmm. And so he walks in, and I had moved out of the chair so he could sit with Dad, and he goes, I was almost expecting, the M&Ms. My dad went into a container and pulled out the M&Ms, and I just wanted to cry because my kids didn't have that relationship with him. Mm-hmm. And it was a combination of talking to my therapist and my faith, where I realized that if I had the level of relationship that I thought I should have had with my dad, I wouldn't have the relationship with God that I have. I wouldn't have accepted that father role. And that being said, I was also very thankful to have the time that I had with my dad. And so I was able to release a lot. And it wasn't that, because at first, when it first happened, I was so angry. I was angry at him because I was like, you can't blame this all on my mother. You didn't try. You know, I was an adult. You didn't come seek me out. You didn't have to go through my mom then. What's your problem? You know, like, so there was a lot of anger. And the fact that they didn't have a service for him just made it worse because I didn't have any outlet. I had nobody to talk to. My brother and sister did not have a relationship with him. They do not, to this day, like him. So they had their own forgiveness issues. But being able to just let that go was releasing to me. Because when you don't forgive someone, you're not holding them hostage. You're holding yourself hostage.
Yes.
And there's, you know, you could, it's like, it's not productive. You're not hurting them. When you don't forgive someone, you're not hurting them. Because half the time they don't even know you don't forgive them. You're the one holding on to it. You're the one that's stuck with all that awful emotion. When it's just easier to just release it and be like, you know what? In the general scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. And even with my mom, you know, I had a very close relationship with my mom, even though it was kind of warped. I loved my mom, and I loved my mom. And I have been slowly able to forgive her for some of the things that happened. Because, again, she was obviously experiencing something. You know, she was going through her own stuff. And as a mom, I hope that my girls and my son will be as forgiving to me. You know, how can I not forgive my parents if I want that same kind of forgiveness from my kids?
Yeah.
You know, and just talking with my girls and seeing their lives and knowing that, you know, they could go to a counselor and be venting on me and talking about things that I've done and what do I want them to say, and how do I want them to feel about me.
No, I totally, I get it. And that's, I when I was in divorce group, one of the things that we would say at the very end of every meeting, we'd stand up, hold hands, and then we would say the Lord's Prayer or the Our Father. And growing up Catholic, I recited it a million times if I said it once. I mean, it was Mom would always make us do the rosary, and that's part of the rosary thing. And I never really thought about the words that I recited until that very first time I'm standing there in group and we're saying the Lord's Prayer to end the meeting, and it says, in there it says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And I don't know that I would have, I felt like I'd been hit with a 2x4 upside the back of the head. And I realized I have to forgive Eric's mother for all that she was doing. And over the 18 months of the divorce, and it just kept getting worse and worse. And ultimately, when she killed Eric. And I remember telling my mother, I said, because we were, you know, they were here and we were planning Eric's funeral, and I said, I have to go. Again, as Catholics, we go to confession, and I said, I got to forgive her. I said, I have to. Because you're right. The forgiveness isn't for them. It's for us.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the last things in this blog. And he cites another person, but basically it's saying that avoiding these unresolved issues, avoiding saying you're sorry, hinders your personal growth. It hinders your ability to function and it hurts you. Ultimately, I guess is what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, I would say it hinders your healing, right?
Uh-huh.
I keep having this image of a sitcom that I like to watch. And in the sitcom, there's the mother and there's a son, and the son is giving the mother the silent treatment for quite a long time in this episode, and finally it comes up, right, with the mother, and he talks about how he's been giving her the silent treatment for X amount of days, and she said, "Really?" She goes, "I hadn't noticed." Right. So, I mean, who are you affecting, right? By holding on to your pain and thinking that you're punishing the other person, who are you affecting? And if that other person has passed, who are you really affecting, right? I mean, they're not there. So, getting that out, and, if you're lucky enough that the person is still here, maybe you can have a conversation with them. But even if that's not successful, you could still have a conversation with a counselor or somebody that can help you get beyond it, get put it, get the forgiveness down and move forward in life, because it isn't worth it.
No, and again, mom and dad did what they thought was best for them at that time. Whether they stayed together, whether they got divorced, whether they acted well, whether they acted poorly. The sooner we can accept what they did, recognize they did what they did because they thought it was the best at the time, and then ultimately at the end of the day forgive them. Absolutely. I mean, I forgave my dad for not taking me fishing, for not taking me hunting, for not being available to teach me how to play baseball. I mean, it took me a long time, but I did forgive him. And that's kind of the whole thing, is that, and that's why I guess I liked this particular article by Dr. Goldsmith, was that just let it go.
I like the picture of we had when we were visiting Eileen's father on his last days here in life, that she got a chance to sit with him. And of course, he asked lots of questions about why we moved away and all that stuff. But then he just sat there, and they just sat next to each other and were holding hands. And I just thought, I mean, that I was tearing up, and I was way across the room looking at my phone, right? Because what else are you going to do in an awkward situation, right? So I'm scrolling, and I look over, and they're holding hands after this conversation, and they just held hands for a long time. And I'm assuming that was a moment of healing for both of you, probably. So.
Well, and it was the last day that he was cognizant.
Yeah, I mean,
it was as if he was waiting for me, and then he wasn't really there anymore. So it was quite amazing, and I was glad to have that time. And that was the other thing, whereas I was thankful that he was returned to me before he passed.
Yeah.
That I didn't have to wait. And that those things were taken care of before he passed.
Because we could do a whole other episode on regret, because I am too. I am glad that you also got that opportunity.
And I got to say, religious or not religious, you mentioned the Lord's Prayer. I mean, we just, in our church that we go to, we just spent 6 months of messages on the Lord's Prayer.
Well, Sermon on the Mount.
The Sermon on the Mount, and part of that is the Lord's Prayer, of course, but it was more than one message on the Lord's Prayer as well. So, I mean, and there's, religious or not, right? There's a lot of things in the secular world that come from and back up some of that kind of those kinds of things from that Sermon on the Mount and the Lord's Prayer, right? Like the forgiveness. I mean, in secular world, it is, you need to forgive, right? You need to let that go. You need to release it. And it's not just some made up thing
or a song by Elsa
that religion has created, or a song by Elsa, right? But let it go. Yeah. Another Disney great, right? I mean, it's a Disney thing. I'm not sure it's great, but yeah, I mean, we gotta do that, right? We gotta forgive. We gotta forgive parents. We gotta forgive spouses. We gotta forgive partners. We gotta forgive friends. I mean,
we do.
It just eats away at you if you don't.
Absolutely. And, I guess if I'm saying anything, cut mom and dad a break.
Yeah, I agree.
And anyway,
especially to my kids, if you're listening, cut me a break. I definitely need it.
The more they forgive and cut you a break, the bigger the Christmas present.
Probably not.
All right. Well, I was trying there. So anyway, well, that's all I got. Eileen, thank you so much for coming back.
That's great.
Well, I hope you didn't feel like you couldn't get a word in edgewise. I apologize if that was the case.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you for forgiving me.
All right.
All right. Well, until next time, you're Scott.
And you're Rod.
See ya.
Bye-bye.